I'd like to begin my presentation with the same principle. Nanong natay faculty orientation today. So by Stephen Covey, to begin with the end in mind. So this means that we need to have a clear idea or understanding about our destination, our goals, our objectives, our intentions, the outcomes we hope to happen. So the same in teaching, we need to know and be guided about the directions and the outcomes we need to acquire or obtain. So in the field of teaching, the first thing we need to do is to bear in mind the learning outcomes that we hope to develop by our students, the knowledge, skills, and values they need to acquire. And with these learning outcomes, we will be guided on what to teach, how to teach, as well as what to assess and how to assess. So talking about assessment, why is it important? So assessment is an integral part of instruction, as it determines whether or not the goals of education are being met. So this is to measure if we really obtain the learning outcomes. Also, assessment affects decisions about the grades of the students, their placement, whether they are ready for the next topic or the next subject, advancement or enrichment. This will also guide us about answering our instructional needs, like the improvement of teaching strategies, approach, technologies, materials, laboratories, environment. The assessment results also guide the improvement and development of the curriculum. And in some cases, funding. So for example, based on your assessment, students have low performance in, for example, carpentry. So that means they lack knowledge, might be, or skills in carpentry. So what will happen? The school will provide the materials to develop the carpentry skills and knowledge of the students. So aside from achieving a high quality teaching, we also need to achieve a high quality assessment. And the first step to achieve the high quality assessment or assessment tool, the test, we need to construct the table of specifications, or we call it as TOS. So, and that's true. Sir V mentioned that it should be drafted before the construction of the test. Okay. So what is TOS? The TOS is a table or a matrix which helps the teacher in designing and constructing a high quality assessment. Okay. The TOS includes the learning outcomes, the content areas like the chapter, the unit or the lesson, the types of tests, for example, multiple choice, true or false, essay, the cognitive levels, which we will discuss later, the number of points or items per level or per topic, the item placement. So for example, test 1, numbers 1 to 5, or test 2, numbers 2, 5, 7, and 8. The TOS also includes the time allocation. And the time allocation here, gi-include ni na ko ang kaning elements nga akong gi-mention. This is based on the CTU format, controlled copy sa CTU format. However, ang kaning time allocation, wala ni siya sa toong CTU format, but this was recommended by one of the AACOP accreditors. Okay. And lastly, we can see in the TUS the weight or the percentage per topic and the cognitive level nga atong gimap. So why do we need to present and construct the TUS first? So just like the architect, we need a blueprint, we need a good plan. And in teaching, we also need the lesson plan. So take note, an hour of plan will save us 10 hours of working. So the TOS will first help you plan out your exam. Okay, you will have a good idea and an overview on what your test looks like. Second, it will make your test construction process more methodological and organized. So in other words, you will not just give your students maka-exam lang, but a high quality test. Next, it will increase the validity and reliability of the test. Validity means the accuracy of the measure, meaning we measure what we intend to measure. So for example, we agreed with our students nga mag-discuss and mag-test about chapter 1 to 3, then that will be the coverage of the prelim. So that we will establish the our validity of the test based sa kaning chapter 1 to 3. Kanus aman na dili valid ang test or maka-affect sa validity sa test. For example, nagsabot mo nga chapter 1 to 3, mo na coverage sa exam, pero ang paghimo nimo sa exam, nadaghan na noon, napuno na lang chapter 1 and chapter 2. Nya wala na appeal si chapter 3. So dili na maka-apekto na siya sa validity sa test. Or nagsabot mo sa students nga chapter 1, 2, 3 ang i-exam, pero na-appeal si chapter 4. Nya wala nimo na-announce, wala nimo na-discuss. So that also affects the validity of the exam. Reliability of the test means the consistency of the measure. Okay, so if widely scattered ba ang data or scores or performance sa estudyante or kuan nagtapok ilahang performance. And reliability can be analyzed using statistics. So however, focus na sa taning validity. So here are the steps in constructing the TOS. So the steps I will present to you based ni siya sa akong presentation. Step 1, you need to determine the coverage of your exam. It's either for the prelim, the topics covered in prelim, topics covered in midterm, semifinal, and final. Step 2, determine your intended learning outcomes for each content area. So here, you will need to identify what is the most significant and meaningful intended learning outcome sa imuhang lesson. Step 4, determine the test type appropriate for each intended learning outcomes. Okay, so daghan kaayong tag test, pero ang pangutana, how to select this type of test. Step 5, determine the points or items per intended learning outcome. 6, sum up the points per intended learning outcome. 7, calculate the percentage per intended learning outcome. 8, determine the points or item per cognitive level. 9, sum up the points per cognitive level. And 10, calculate the percentage per cognitive level. And lastly, determine the time allocation for each type. So this is the format we follow in CTU. So we fill this out, subject code, for example, Ed 216 for my subject assessment in Learning 1 for the first semester of school year 2022-2023. So for the department, you can say education and social sciences. So under KASE, we have 3 departments. So depende ni siya kung asa ni nga course ang kani nga subject na belong. So although I am a math teacher, I'm supposed to be under Department of Math and Science, but since this subject is under DESMAN siya, Professional Education, so Department of Education and Social Sciences at Uyutan. Next is student course and year. We have the BEd 2. The next part of the table of specifications are the 4 major exams. So you will just shade which exam you're planning to work on or construct your TOS. So for example, in my presentation, we will construct TOS for preliminary examination. Okay, so we will shade the preliminary examination. So let us recognize and be familiar with the parts of this TOS. In the first column, we have the intended learning outcomes, followed by the contents. Next is the types of tests. Next is the different cognitive learning levels according to revised Bloom's taxonomy. Next column is points per topic. And lastly, percentage per topic. Another part is the total points per level. So this is the summation of each cognitive learning level and the total percentage per level. So also I included here the time allocation. So if prelim ni siya, this should be 90 minutes or 1.5 hours. Then for the midterm and final, that is 2 hours or 120 minutes. Okay. So first, step 1, identify the intended learning outcomes and the contents. So we need to base our intended learning outcomes from our syllabus. Okay. So the intended learning outcomes and contents are already reflected in the course syllabus. Example. So this is an example of my course syllabus. The first column shows the intended learning outcomes. And the fourth column shows the contents. Okay. So these two, magpili lang ta ani unsay pinaka-significant and meaningful nga intended learning outcome nga atuang gustong i-measure or i-develop sa atong mga estudyante. Okay? Ma'am, pwede ta magkuan ka nang mag-formulate. You can formulate but make sure na kuan lang yun sad siya kanang relevant siya sa kaning atuang kuan kay unified man guni atuang syllabus. So these are the competencies we are expected to develop and measure. So we have here example. I will choose this intended learning outcome. Identify the characteristics of a good student learning outcomes based on the outcomes-based education, and this specific intended learning outcome map to the topic outcomes-based assessment or the formulation of student learning outcomes. So i-copy-paste na niya na to, ibutang na to sa tuang table of specification na nadira. Okay. Next is to identify the type of test. So in identifying the type of test, we need to be guided by the kind of or level of learning outcome. So let us have a quick review or talk about the different types of tests. So the different types of tests, we have the objective type and the subjective type. When we say objective type, there is or are factual answers of a question. Subjective type, meaning open-ended or closed-ended iyahang answer. So objective type, we have supply type, wherein students will supply their answers or responses. Examples of supply type, we have identification. We also have enumeration or a listing. Third, completion, or we call it fill in the blanks. Matching type, and we also have alternative response type, meaning there are two answers, possible answers for a question. I mean, we have true or false, right or wrong, agree, disagree, good or bad. So muna siya examples of alternative response type. We also have modified true or false. And lastly, the multiple choice. Sa tanang type of test ani niya, ang magamit permi is the multiple choice because it can measure all the levels of learning. Muna siya ang board exam, multiple choice. Then we have the subjective type, the essay. And in essay, napuntay duha open-ended essay and closed-ended essay. So let's go back to our example. We have here the intended learning outcome. Identify the characteristics of a good SLO. Okay, and the contents. Our goal here is to identify what type of test, okay, that is appropriate to our intended learning outcome. So next is we need to map asa ni ang intended learning outcome na belong. Does it belong to remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating? So what are these skills? So these skills are behaviors, intellectual behavior of our students is proposed by Benjamin Bloom. He headed a group of educational psychologists who developed a classification of levels or taxonomy of learning levels. So there are three domains of learning according to him. We have the cognitive domain, affective domain, and psychomotor domain. When we say cognitive domain, it pertains to cognition or the thinking skills or the mental skills of the students. Affective domain pertains to students' social, emotional behavior, okay, or values development sa ato ang estudyante. Because they say educating the heart is as important as educating the mind. Then another domain of learning according to Bloom is psychomotor domain. So this pertains to the body and mind coordination skills of the students. So this is the hierarchy or the levels of cognitive learning. The first level is remembering. Second, understanding, followed by applying. Next is analyzing. Next is evaluating. And lastly, creating. So remembering means it is the ability of the students to recall facts, basic terms, and concepts of previously learned lesson. So to measure this skill, we will use, or to measure or to develop these skills, we will use mga verbs. Okay. Verbs under remembering are define, describe, identify, name, recall, state, label, list, enumerate, memorize, match, recognize. So an example of learning outcome under remembering are recite the VMGO. So that this is a good way to test the memory skills of the students in reciting the VMGO. Next, enumerate the different parts of a computer, and remember the names and relationships of cast of characters in a play. So, bisad unsa siguro nga subject, naaman siguro tanid taning skill of remembering. So, what are the types of tests appropriate in testing the memory skills of the students? We have supply type for the identification, enumeration, completion, matching type, alternative response type or true or false, and we also have modified true or false. And lastly, the multiple choice. So let's go back to our TOS. So we have here our intended learning outcome. So our next goal is to identify what type of test. So take note that this type of learning outcome belongs to the skill of under remembering. Okay, kay nagamit man siya og verb nga identify the characteristics. So it tests the memory of the students. So recall nga naatay types of test that we can use to test the skill in remembering, kani sila tanan. So which do you think ang most appropriate sa kani nga intended learning outcome? Okay? So ang most appropriate ani niya, kay nagamit man siya ga-identify, we will use identification. The supply type or identification. So there are times nga na sa tong course syllabus gi-mention dito define. Okay, define, describe, enumerate or list. So ang again ang type of test magdepende sa tuang nature sa tuang learning outcome. So next, after identifying the type of test, we will now identify or determine pila ka points ang atuang ihatag ani. Okay, i-allocate ani nga learning outcome. So we can say 5 points. Okay, nga atong i-allocate sa kani nga learning outcome. Next is the skill in understanding. Here, students are expected to explain ideas or concept. So the words that will help us formulate LOs or identify a learning outcome if understanding na siya, muna siyang mga verbs nga to ang gamiton. We have restate, translate, interpret, explain, discuss, classify, distinguish, differentiate, report, express, give example, illustrate, express, and report. So example of learning outcomes nga nagamit ani nga mga verbs. Distinguish a prose literature from poetry. Another, understand and explain the main ideas of a play or piece of literature. So these activities or skills will demonstrate the skills of understanding. So what are the types of tests na maka-measure sa skill in understanding? We can use alternative response type, true or false. So by the way, when we construct the true or false, dili ta mag kopyahon ang original text sa libro. Instead, we need to restate it. Kay kung kapyahon yun na to, word verbatim, word for word ang text nga sa libro, sayon ra kay na pag-answer sa estudyante. So to really test their understanding about the concept, ato na siyang i-restate ang kana nga concept or kana nga sentence, then pa-answeran na to tong estudyante if it is true or false. Next, we have modified true or false, multiple choice. We can also have analogy, and we can also have essay. Also, we can use graphic organizers or concept map. So example, let's go back to our TUS. Let's have here, distinguish measurement, assessment, and evaluation. This is taken from the topic, measurement, assessment, and evaluation in OBE. So what type of test appropriate for this learning outcome? Take note that this learning outcome is under the skill of understanding. And we have these different types of tests that we can use to measure the skill in understanding. Okay, apil dito multiple choice na rin. So pwede ni siya magamit kaning unom, pito, apil ang multiple choice to test the skill in understanding. Then ikaw na magbuot kung unsaon unsay imong pilion. So for example, I will choose the multiple choice. Then I will allocate points for this intended learning outcome. So for example, 5 points. Take note, wala siya na-align dere. Supposedly, ang understanding na to ani ang pag-allocate of points, ang kaning pag-allocate of points dapat mo map sa intended learning outcome and the cognitive level. Okay? So for example, nganong diri man ta nagbutang sa points because this learning outcome belongs to the skill of understanding. Okay, dili man ni siya, distinguishing these concepts is not under remembering. Deeper naman ni siya. Okay, differentiating these concepts is under understanding. So diri ta magbutang og points. So after understanding, we need to develop a higher level thinking, and that is applying. So after they recall something, they can identify the terms, identify the purpose or definition, or let's say define it. I-apply ni nato ang kaning knowledge. So what do we mean by applying? This is the ability of the students to use information to new or other situations. So the verbs we can use that manifest the skills in applying, we have apply, demonstrate, dramatize, employ, illustrate, draw, operate, practice, schedule, sketch, solve, use, write, and execute. So here are the examples of learning outcomes under applying. First, we have solve a word problem. We can also have demonstrate the skills in drawing. And we can also have write an advice column corresponding or responding to one of the characters in a play. So observe katong sa remembering kay nag-identify ra siya sa mga characters. Sunod ang mga roles sa mga characters. Next kay maghatag na siya og advice sa taga-character. So ang learning nagga-develop, nagkataas ang iyahang learning or level of learning. So what are the tests we can use to measure the skills in applying? We can have supply type. Yan ang supply type. For example, solve a word problem. Here, students will supply a solution a strategy, a plan, execute or show their solution supply type. Next is completion. Okay. Third, alternative response type. Depende ni sa pagkahimo sa imuhang questions. Fourth, modified true or false. Fifth, multiple choice. And we can also have essay. So example sa essay, write an advice column responding to one of the characters in a play. So when we say write, they can express their idea through essay. So let's go back to our QS. Okay, let's have these learning outcomes and the contents. So what type of test that we will use with these learning outcomes? Take note that this learning outcome demonstrate understanding on the underlying principles of OBE. Kung nanam siya giterm nga demonstrate, so this is under applying. So these are the tests that we can use to measure the skills or the skill in applying. So kani unsa ka ato ang pwedeng magamit and demonstrate understanding on the underlying principles of OBE. Kani sila pwede ni sila depende sa pag-construct nimo sa kuan sa question. So for me, for example, I will just use multiple choice. Pwede sa essay. Now, after identifying the type of test, let us allocate points. So for example, 5 points. So after nila ma-remember, na sila na-acquire na sila skills in remembering, understanding, applying, dari na punta sa analyzing. So analyzing means this is the ability of the students to draw connections among ideas. So when we say analyze, we break the idea into smaller ideas, then find relationship among them, draw connections among these ideas. So the terms or the verbs we can use to identify if analyzing siya, we have analyze, organize, relate, compare, contrast, differentiate, distinguish, discriminate, examine, experiment, question, test, investigate, break down. So we have an example of learning outcome for analyzing. First example, compare and contrast the administration of Duterte and Marcos. We can also have analyze the roles of each character in the play and their relationship to each other. So, ang level of learning kay nagkataas. Okay, so what are the tests we can use to measure the skill in analyzing? We can have multiple choice, we can have essay, we can also have supply type. So let's go back to our QS. Supposing we have here learning outcome, analyze the difference between program objectives and student learning outcomes. So let us identify the type of test appropriate to this learning outcome. So take note that this learning outcome belongs to analyzing. Ang keyword na to ani kay ang word nga analyze. So ato i-review ang mga different types of tests na magamit to measure the skills in analyzing. We have multiple choice, essay, and supply type. So asa may pinaka-appropriate ani or imuhang ganahan gamiton, we can use essay. Okay. Then after identifying the type of test, we will now allocate points. So for example, 10 points. So kamo na magbuot kung pila ka points ang inyong ihatag per learning outcome. After analyzing, students should have the ability or develop the ability of evaluating. Here, students are expected to judge the value of information, materials, or methods for given purposes, or even justify a decision or plan. So what are the verbs we can guide us in developing and assessing the skill of in evaluating? We can have appraise, argue, assess, evaluate, judge, compare, defend, estimate, predict, rate, support, value, and weigh up. There are other verbs pa di ay nga available po online. So examples of learning outcomes under evaluating, we have the critique a research paper, evaluate the decisions of characters in the play, and support your evaluation with the textual evidence. So what are the types of tests that we can use to measure the skill in evaluating? We can use multiple choice or essay. So let's go back to our TOS. For example, we have a learning outcome, examine the goals, standards, and content in the teaching of TLE. So for example, so what type of test that we can that is appropriate to this learning outcome? So take note, this learning outcome is under evaluating. And these are the list of types of tests that we can use to measure the skill in evaluating, multiple choice and essay. So, asa may mas appropriate examining the goals and standards. We can use essay here. So after identifying the types of essay, it's time for us to allocate points. So you can say 5 points lang para ani nga intended learning outcome and para sa kaning skill in evaluating. And the last learning level, cognitive learning level, according to revised Bloom's taxonomy of learning, is the student's ability to create or creating. Here, students are expected to produce new or original work. The verbs that will guide us in developing and assessing a learning outcome, we have create, design, develop, formulate, generate, organize, plan, prepare, propose, set up, assemble, author, compose, construct. Okay, and examples of learning outcomes under creating, we have design an original homework problem dealing with the principle of conservation of energy. Another example is create a new and unique piece of writing using similar plot devices. Okay, so what are the types of tests that can measure the skill in evaluating? Creating. In paper pencil test, we can have essay, but there are also learning outcomes that can be measured or assessed using authentic assessment tools. Okay, you can have performance-based assessment, which uses rubric, or product-based assessment or project-based assessment, which use scoring rubrics, which will be tackled by Dr. Daisy Obiso. So for the paper pencil test or the traditional assessment, we can have essay or supply type. You can also ask the students to create a concept map or graphic organizer. Okay. So let's go back to the to our table of specification. Let us have an example here. We have formulate student learning outcomes in every level of each type of learning. Okay. So deciding, we need to decide what type of test nga appropriate sa kaning learning level or learning outcome, sorry. So take note, this is under the skill in creating. So these are the tests that we can use to measure the skill in creating supply type or essay. If naamoy ma-mention nga lain nga test nga tanaw ninyo pwede pod magamit, pwede na to i-share karon. So here, let's for example, supply type ang ato ang gamiton because students will formulate learning outcomes on each level of learning. After identifying the type of test, we can now allocate points. So for example, 10 points for this learning outcome and this skill. So this is now the itsura sa ato ang TOS. We have the intended learning outcomes with corresponding points, which is mapped to its appropriate cognitive learning level. Okay, this and so next we have points per topic. So points per topic, how to compute this one or determine this one. Here we will just need to sum up the points nga sum up the row points nga na belong ani nga topic or learning outcome. So here we only have 5. Kung nani siya other points diri, so imo lang i-add. So here we only have 5, so therefore we write 5 here. Next, the second learning outcome, 5 rasad, so we write 5. And for the next learning outcome, 5 gihapon. Then next, 10 man siya, 10. So kung for example na siya 3, so that means 10 plus 3, ang suwat na to diri 13. Kung daghan ni siya points nga imong gibutang dira, imuha nang i-sum up. Next is same thing, ipang-add lang natin ang points, then write it here. Next, sa last na learning outcome, 10. So we have 10. The next thing we need to do is to sum up all these points to obtain the total points per level. So we have 5 plus 5 plus 5, 15, plus 10, 25, plus 5, 30, plus 10, 40. So add this up and you get 40. So the next part of our TOS here is the percentage per topic. So how to calculate the percentage per topic? So we have the formula. So the formula is we can compute the percentage per topic if we divide points per topic and the total points per level. So unsa maning points per topic kaning mga 5. Nya ang 5 kaning 5, 10, 5, 10. So muna points per topic. Then total points per level kaning 40. So for example, we need to get the percentage per topic sa kaning row. So percentage per topic, we have 5, kani siya 5 divided by 40 times 100%. So that is equal to 12.5%. So you can now write it here, 12.5%. Then same thing, 5 man is siya, 5 divided by 40. Okay, times 100. Okay, 5 divided by 40 times 100, 12.5%. Next is 10 divided by 40 times 100, we have 25%, and so on. After that, we will need to sum this up. This should equal to 100%. Okay, so mo diri na to siya, ayaw lang ibutang diri sa kaning level kay ang nagka-indicate ni niya is total points per level man. So ari lang ta sa ubos sa total percentage per level. Okay. Next, diri na pud ta sa total points per level, kaning remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So how to get the total points per level? Yes, we will just need to sum up all the points niya na aning a column. And that is 5. This column also, that is 5. Kung in the event niya, nani siya 7 dere, so that means 5 plus 7, so it should be 12. Next, 5. Okay. Next, we have 10. Then 5 also. Then we have 10. Okay. Then make sure nga ang total ani niya, that means 5 plus 5 plus 5, 15 plus 10, 25 plus 5, 30 plus 10. It should also be equal to 40, which is same rani sa kani. Ang dapat ang row ug ang column mag-abot og 40. Next is how to get the total percentage per level. So we have here the formula. Percentage per level, kay mo man ang 6 levels, we will have points per level, for example, kaning 5 divided by total points per topic, 40. So same thing, 5 divided by 40 times 100%. So that is 12.5%. This is also 12.5%. This is also 12.5%. 10 divided by 40 times 100, that is 1/4 of, so that is 25%. Then 5 divided by 40, same thing. Also, kinahanglan, nag-add sad na to ani niya, mo sum up sad na siya 100%. So, muna ni siya ang ato ang complete, di pa ni siya complete nga TOS. So, what is the point of having the two TOS also is para makita nato ang weight sa taga, for example, sa taga topic. So, kung ako ang accreditor, makita na ko nga asa ang topic nga dako kayo weight. So kaning 25% comprise ang dako nga location, meaning dako ka points or gi-value nimo maayo ang kaninga learning outcome. Okay. Nya kung ari pud ta sa column, kaning 25% mas gi-value nimo or importante ang emphasize nimo ang kaning level of learning. So nakanindot po daning TOS, makita nimo if kanang basin unyag napuno lang og enumeration or understanding. So that would mean your test only measures the surface learning. Nya na po ba niya napuno o puros essay. So dili sa dyan maayo kay you are only limiting the skills of the students. So ari ra ka pirmi sa kaning mga applying, analyzing, evaluating. Wala na ta na measure sa remembering, understanding. So ideally dapat na atay allocation that will test the remembering skills, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Also, based sa ato ang map, sa ato ang TOS, for example, if we add kaning deep learning, 12.5 plus 25 plus 12.5 plus 25, so I think that is 75%. So that means 75% of the test comprises, I will measure these skills, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating, or the deep learning of the students. So makita nato if nindot ba ni ang test or bati ba ni nga test. So kay na naman siya map. This is also, we will use TOS para mo-avoid sa nga magpuro na lang ta enumeration or magpuro na lang ta essay. So the degree of difficulty kay ma-adjust nato daan. Okay. Next is kaning time allocation. So if we have prelim exam, we can allocate 90 minutes for that exam or 1.5 hours according to one of the accreditors. You-suggest niya nga magbutang lang tag time allocation para at least ma-identify nato if makaya ba yun ni og answer ang kaning test given the specific time period. So 10 minutes kay lower thinking skills man ni sila niya daghan dako nga time sa mga higher order thinking skills. Okay, so 10 minutes for the skill in kaning remembering, understanding, and 20 minutes for applying, analyzing, and creating. So another thing, natay gitawag nga item placement or unsa na siya nga item. Ang purpose aning test item placement is that magamit ni nato labi na kung nanatay item analysis. Mag-analyze taga item kung asa ang item dapat i-reject, i-revise, or i-retain. So, maghimo sa tag map. For example, maghimo tag test 1. Sa test 1, it will be about kaning learning outcome. It will be kani siya nga type of test, that is test 1. Therefore, test 1 is supply type measuring the learning outcomes, kani nga learning outcome. Test 2 is about multiple choice, and it will measure these two learning outcomes. Kaya multiple choice maning duha. Okay. Nya ang pag-arrange sad nato sa to ang test items, it is suggested dapat dili sunod-sunod. Okay, or walay mahimong pattern. Kanina man ni pattern, sige na lang. So you can have 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So meaning mag-construct kag test item number 1 sa multiple choice should be about distinguishing measurement, assessment, and evaluation. Then item number 2 should be a question about demonstrating their understandings on underlying principles of OBE. So nana ng item placement serves as the map. Okay. Map kung asa ni makitan ni mga test item. Next, we have test 3. Test 3 is essay type. You can say 1 point siya, ano kung ning gibutang nga point, pwede ta mo buhat dirag one item that is equivalent to 10 points. So pwede na siya, isuot na nato. Then test 3, that is also under essay type. Then 2 items. Okay, 1 item din siya. 1 item dayon worth 5 points. Then you can have here next test 5 supply type. Students will formulate student learning outcomes in every level for each type of learning. Here, maghimo ba karog 5 ka items, anya 2 points each. So mo nang 10 points. Okay. So this is now the complete table of specification. Medyo detailed kaayo siya. Pero dili man siguro ni required ang kuan gyud ang kaning time allocation o item placement. Pero kung ganahan gyud mo nga mas ma-guided, pwede na nato ibutang. So test 2, test 3, test 4. So this is now, so to recap, we will fill out the kaning mga blanks atong table of specification. Next is determine nga unsay unsa nga exam imo ang himuan og TOS. Next, identify the intended learning outcomes, iyahang contents, the type of test. Nga, with respect to the intended learning outcome, you will identify if it is under remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. Next is to determine the points per topic. Points per topic is the row. Okay, row total. Next is the percentage per topic, the total points per level, the percentage per level, and the time allocation. So I think that would be enough for my presentation. Okay, we also need to make sure nga mag-match ang ato ang points per topic kanidere. Okay, as well as the percentage per topic. So before I end my presentation, I'd like to share a quote that an hour of planning can save you 10 hours of doing. Okay, save tag time, effort, money, dili kayo daghan og revision. And also with the TOS, we can ensure that we able to measure the intended learning outcomes na gusto natong i-measure. And if you think based on the assessment results, kanang you only obtain small success, and if you think that the plan doesn't work, change the plan and not the goal. So that means you continuously refine yourselves, the TOS, until na maka-achieve ka sa imong desired outcome. So here are my references. So thank you, and I hope you earned with your mind and with your time. Thank you, and God bless.